Hello, my name is Peter Douglas. I'm the CEO of IPAF. Welcome to IPAF's webinar, Developing a MEWP Safe Use Plan. I'm delighted to announce that we have well over 400 people registered for this event from over 36 countries around the globe, making it a truly worldwide event. So thank you for registering. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are. I hope you're well and safe. This webinar will be translated simultaneously for those watching live into German, French and Italian, so please follow the on-screen instructions. The first thing I must do is thank our sponsors for this event. Thank you very much to Bronto Skylift, Sunwood, Hinoa and Cinoboom. Without your help, these events couldn't take place. We have three speakers for you today. Firstly, Brian Parker, IPAF's Head of Safety and Technical, will discuss, it will really set the scene. It will discuss why it is imperative to have a safe use plan. And Brian will also share with you some of the accident data we collect through our accident reporting portal. And then we have Tony Groat, our North American manager. Tony will walk you through the steps of creating a safe use plan for MEWPs, signposting resources that you can use in doing so. And then Paul Roddis, IPAF's training manager, will point out the different training requirements for the different parts of the safe use plan in a bit of a summing up. There will be an opportunity at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen, and we will try and cover off as many as we can at the end. So before I hand over to our first speaker, I would like to introduce a short video from one of our sponsors today, Hinoa. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Inoa. Right, I would like to hand over now to our first speaker of this webinar. Please welcome Brian Parker, IPAF's Head of Safety and Technical.
Thank you, Peter, and great to be here today. So good morning, good afternoon and good evening to wherever you are in the world. Echo Peter's thoughts earlier, hope you're all well. So today I'm going to be discussing the safe use and really trying to set the scene. We take so much for granted in life, and what we're trying to do is put a little bit into perspective with MEWPs, and hopefully you can see through the part I go will hopefully dovetail quite nicely into the next speaker's subject. So I will cover, are your MEWPs safe? A little bit of a reality check and perspective, look at the accident triangle and introduce essentially our industry triangle, and certainly for the viewers that that are watching this today, I could do with some of your help in some of this in this area. We'll look at the versatility and never forget that is going to grow with the way in which MEWPs are designed and built. Look at some stats towards the latter part of the presentation, and then finish up with a little quick summary. So firstly, let's remember that we as IPAF, on behalf of our members, you, collect, analyse and review the accident data that is entered onto our database. And it's easy essentially to be drawn into the negative side of powered access and wrongly assume that all days end up with an incident or an accident or something goes wrong. And I suppose when I have the ability to look at all this data, you can wrongly assume that. But let's put this into perspective. There are an estimated 1.6 million MEWPs in the world, thereabouts. They're owned, rented, and used with millions of hours incident and accident free, and people home safely to their families and their loved ones, which is the most important part. But from time to time, things do go wrong, and it's from these incidents that we must learn, and we must learn collectively, all of us, to work together to ensure we prevent future incidents. Looking at some of the incidents, we often refer to this as the root cause of some of the incidents, and we certainly, that's how some of the campaigns that IPAF look at later in the year, to look at the root causes of some of the incidents. MEWPs are well designed, built well, as we've just seen an example there from one of our manufacturers, rigorously tested and researched. Yes, they are built to different standards around the world, depending on which market they're for, but to all intents and purposes, they are safe, and the standards that we can see there, an example on the screen, are some of them that we rigorously check and make sure that they are the appropriate. So 800,000 active PAL cards currently in use globally. This sees MEWPs operators with varying levels of experience and competence operating different types, categories and models in different sectors and applications. But how many of you listening today consider how MEWPs have changed ours and your way of working? And I will put in a common denominator for all that, and that is you. You yourselves have the difference to ensure the job goes well and above all safely, and you get home to your families, which is what it's all about. Their increased use has without doubt increased productivity and output in terms of what you do in your job. It's made it easier. You do more jobs now, and quicker and a lot safer. It is identified, or MEWPs identified as one of the safest and most efficient means of providing temporary access for people at height. Advances in standards and design have helped reduce the number of fatalities and serious incidents. We have MEWPs for managers courses, MEWPs for supervisors. We have training. This has all improved knowledge, and now operators before have more information than they've ever had before. Using MEWPs helps provide access to difficult and sometimes challenging areas, perhaps previously gained by using alternative means of access. And essentially there is there's a plethora of guidance out there now available, and information and safe use documents available. But fundamentally it comes down to how they are used and how they are managed. And this ultimately at some point reflects on the operators and the management and the supervision on site. Let's face it, at-risk behaviours occur on the job sites all over the world at all times. For example, a MEWP operator doesn't wear a harness whilst doing working at height, doesn't check the ground before setting up the machine on it, or perhaps doesn't even carry out their own pre-use and function checks. Now, often these behaviours are benign, they cause no issues, and as a result, continued unchanged. And that developed a culture. If I do it once, I get away with it. However, if you see this happening and don't challenge these behaviours, statistically, this can result in a more serious incident, injury, or fatality later on. But the question is, how can we quantify that relation between what we see as low-level, unsafe behaviours and a serious incidents? All of you here today will have perhaps at some point in time forgot to check your machine over, thought it was fine yesterday, not bothered checking the ground before you set up. These are the cultural things. Now, back in 1931, well before I was born, a very clever gentleman called William Herbert Heinrich, who was working for a traveller's insurance company, attempted essentially to answer that question. And Heinrich estimated that for every major injury, there are 29 minor injuries, and there are also 300 accidents without injury. So you can see there what we often refer to as the Heinrich triangle. Now, in 1961, Frank Bird refined Heinrich's work, and Bird undertook a massive study, including looking into 2 million accidents, 300 companies, and over 3 billion hours that have been worked. And his results essentially showed that for every major injury, there are 10 minor injuries, 30 accidents causing property damage and things like that, and there's 600 accidents with no injury or damage. So essentially that Bird triangle finished at the 600, and he focused essentially at the top of from a fatality to a near miss. Then ConocoPhillips Marine then expanded our understanding one step further, and it found that for every fatality, there are approximately 300,000 at-risk behaviours. And these studies are often combined to form what we call the safety triangle or the safety pyramid. Probably seen it in a lot of businesses and a lot of safety magazines, etc. Now, while these numbers specified here are somewhat debatable and probably sometimes industry dependent, the conclusion is clear. A large enough number of unsafe acts will eventually result in a fatality. So where does that leave IPAF? We have sadly, as an industry, over an 8-year period, had 349 fatal incidents reported into our IPAF accident reporting portal. We've had 205 major incidents. We've had over 1,000 minor first aid injuries, and we've had 982 near misses reported. The red box essentially indicates that if we follow Bird and Heinrich and ConocoPhillips theory, we have a very what we call high underreporting in these areas. And if we work on the ConocoPhillips rationale of adding the unsafe acts, this would mean that how many unsafe acts have we had? So if we calculate that out, unfortunately, and if we took that rationale, we've nearly had 105 million unsafe acts in that time. Now, we need to know more about operator unsafe acts. We often hear about all the incidents that happen, and I've given you some of them statistics there. Yeah, but we need to get to the root cause of this and start getting the operators to sort of engage with us on this aspect. So essentially, if we look at that, probably the bit that I'm looking at there is the red box, predominantly, because that's highly underreported. There's certainly a lot more incidents there if we take the rationale on the left. Okay, but some days it may be being in the wrong place at the wrong time. How many times you perhaps, even at home, gone to climb up a ladder or stand on a chair, without somebody holding it or footing it, and you're doing something unsafe. You could be injured, you're at home, you're in your castle, but the last time you did it, you got away with it, and you didn't get hurt or you didn't get injured. And that's sometimes, where we sometimes forget safety doesn't stop when we leave the workplace. It can also be at home. So the next sort of concept I want to give you in this system is a guy called James Reason came up with the Swiss cheese model of explaining this. And Reason compared human systems to layers of Swiss cheese. Now, each layer is a defense against something going wrong. So essentially, our mistakes and our failures. There are holes in the defense because no human system is perfect. We're not machines. We do make mistakes. So something breaking through a hole, as you can see, it isn't a huge problem, as things do, go wrong occasionally, and that could be any matter of things. But as humans, we have developed to cope with minor failures and mistakes as routine and part of life. Something small goes wrong, we fix it, and we move on. Now, within our systems, there are often several layers of defense. and essentially more slices of the Swiss cheese. Hopefully you can see where this is going. Now, things become a major problem essentially when failures follow a path. And we don't look at active failures, what happened, and we certainly don't look at any of the latent things that we knew about it, but we did nothing about it. And unfortunately, all the defense layers sometimes are broken down, and we can unfortunately find that the holes have lined up and we have a loss in some situation. So if we consider the safe use of the MEWP, in this context then, this is the process of how operators are selected and trained. The risk assessment that was carried out, essentially looking at what hazards and risks we're going to be potentially exposed to, or the operators are going to be exposed to. The planning and the procedures needed to ensure the job runs safely. The type of MEWP that's been selected to carry out the tasks, the quality of the inspection and thorough examination. So, it will be, in different regions, it may be that, it's 6 monthly, where in other places it may be different sort of frequencies. The level of training and the familiarization and competence of the person, who is using the equipment, and how they carry out their inspections and how they carry out and record their daily checks. And of course, latterly, we have, the level of safe use and supervision appropriate. Now, hopefully there you can see there's some of the elements of what we would consider to be, at least some of the parts in a safe use plan. So, when we take into account like a hazard and a loss as identified there, the loss could be very minimal. It could be as simple as a rescue from height scenario, but you've got to have a plan in place for it. So if something does go wrong, we're able to, execute it safely, efficiently, and get that person down. And more importantly, we've practiced that, because that's also in our planning and our risk side of things. Now, here we can see a selection of MEWPs in setup. The preparation, they're also in preparation for travel. So you can see the bottom left picture there. So time that has been taken to plan that, as opposed to perhaps just, it'll be okay. And these photos perhaps indicate some extreme versatility of where these MEWPs can be used. But one thing is really clear: planning, risk assessment, and safe systems. They are a must before we consider putting people to work at height. So just to cover off some of the worldwide stats, as this is an ongoing process where daily people and businesses and members are putting instant data into our accident portal. What you can see there is the data from 2012 to 2019. 2020 data at the moment is being ratified by the IPAF accident work group, and then very shortly, all being well, that then should be entered into this portal, so you'll get specific live information. Now, the bulk of the data that you can see, a bulk of the reports essentially was provided by UK-based rental companies and members, but the shift is changing. We are seeing more members around the world now identifying that this is a great project where they can interact and give us the information of when unfortunately it goes wrong, or what learnings we can do. The data, as you can see, is from 21 countries. And as I said earlier on, the accident triangle there unfortunately identifies that there was 349 fatal incidents. In terms of the dashboard filters, there are ways and means in which we can extract information, as you can see there. So hopefully, not in the not too distant future, you'll see some more, information coming out of that, where you, as yourselves as users and members, will be able to see this within your own membership on the website. So also it gives us reports by country. So you can see that most reports, as I mentioned earlier, come from the United Kingdom. That is because accident and incident reporting was mandated by IPAF for rental companies. It also identifies lost time incidents by industry, highlighting here that construction and arborists, certainly have the most fatals, but whereas you can see rental activities and others do have, incidents that happen equally as well, facilities management sectors. The industry sectors, as I say, is essentially construction, then rental activities. So you could appreciate there'd be quite a high number of incidents on construction sites, and unfortunately fatals. But also as well there, you can see that there are other, and this is because the old portal used to have the ability to put in free text, so people wouldn't select the category of essentially sector that they were working in. So hopefully now we're going to be able to, with the new portal, because it specifically asks what sector are the individuals working in. Failed reports by country, You can see here that the US and North America had the greatest number of fatalities within this, with sort of 71% of all fatals. However, it's got to be put into context, as they do have the largest amount of MEWPs in the world. And you can also see that Canada, UK, and Australia are next, and then other highlighted countries. So, we've got to work together to improve this as an industry. So, for me to conclude then, are your MEWPs safe? I certainly think that, this depends on you, and without doubt, you do have your part to play in the process. There should be a documented risk assessment. There should be appropriate planning. There should be an equipment selection process. Don't just always pick the same machine that you've used in the past. Manufacturers are coming up with fantastic solutions to get you into places perhaps where you've never thought of before. We should have a documented inspection examination process, that should be rigorous, should be checked. And, let's remember that we should be ensuring that operators do their part, how they were trained to carry out their pre-use checks, their function checks. Whatever training that we have, let's hope from an IPAF perspective, that you've had the appropriate training for an operator, supervisor, loading and unloading, and don't forget very shortly also as well, we've got the new site assessment for MEWP selection course coming out. I had to think of the correct term. Doesn't roll off the tongue that yet, but we'll get there. And of course, evidence of competence. So a means in terms of finding how people are trained and what qualifications they've got. And last but not least, adequate supervision. Remembering, of course, that if any part of that process or perhaps cheese is missing or slips, then this could result in a serious incident. So that's me. Hopefully you found my session thoughtful. I will now hand back to Peter Douglas, who will take you to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Very insightful. Now gives me great pleasure to introduce our North American manager, Mr. Tony Groat will take you through the main body of this webinar. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Peter, and good day to all, and thank you for your time today. This presentation is intended for all users of mobile elevated work platforms. So if you have an operator for any purpose, you're a user of the equipment, and you must manage your risk to develop a MEWP-specific safe use plan. The safe operation of mobile elevated work platforms is the same regardless of where you are on planet Earth. ISO standards are the foundation for country standards with the same purpose: to establish and provide an understanding of requirements for the application, inspection, training, maintenance, repair, and safe operation of MEWPs, with the objective to prevent accidents, personal injuries, and property damage while working at height. In order to achieve MEWP safe operations, we must start with the first question: how do we measure MEWP safe operations? So let me state that safety is not the absence of accidents. Safety is the presence of defenses to prevent accidents and reduce the consequences of accidents if they cannot be prevented. It is the ability to manage risk and avoid or mitigate incidents that can cause harm or damage. We too often see unsafe actions that did not result in accidents. Some companies survive years in unsafe work environments without an accident. Does that mean they have a safe workplace? As demonstrated in these pictures, what is the risk management strategy for these companies? Nothing happened, so they don't need to do anything. What are they measuring? If it's only accidents, they can't prevent unsafe conditions from reoccurring, so they are not measuring anything to require accidents. As you've heard from Brian regarding accident analysis, We can only act on what we report, including unsafe acts. The identification of improper activities, near misses, can point us towards the means to prevent them from becoming an accident. That is why a MEWP Safe Use Plan will be the foundation for a safe workplace. Laws and regulations make it a user's duty to protect their workers from harm. Do you have a plan on how you manage your risk and ensure safe MEWP operations? While MEWPs are the safest means for workers to gain temporary work at height, their safety is dependent upon several factors. A safe use plan or a system of work that is specific to mobile elevated work platforms must be in place by all employers who select MEWPs to access temporary work at height. To ensure the safety of all in the work area and effective operations to complete the task required, a systemic plan is necessary. The plan must accommodate all MEWP operations, from the short-term, simple task to the complex operations that can take months or years to complete. The plan must address the application, inspections, training, maintenance, repair, and safe operation of mobile elevated work platforms. Our industry standards for safe use, including ISO 18893 and in the US ANSI A92.22, require a system of work or safe use plan to be developed by MEWP users or employers. The MEWP Safe Use Plan will include the implementation of all the requirements in your country standard for safe use and training. The plan will assist users to address all of the requirements needed to prevent accidents, personal injuries, and property damage. This screen summarizes the 11 topics that must be part of your safe use plan. Today, we'll briefly review each of these topics and specific processes and procedures that will aid management to effectively manage risk and avoid incidents that can cause harm or damage. So, when do you need a safe use plan? You need a safe use plan before any MEWP work begins. And the starting point of the safe use plan is the completing of a risk assessment for a given task or site. There are several stages to a risk assessment. You must identify the task to be undertaken. This includes the task to be performed, the location, and the timing. You must have the selection of the equipment and tools for the task. Assess the risk associated with that task. You must identify control measures and then have a rescue plan for all work at height. And at the end, ensure that you communicate all of the results of your risk assessment. The extent of the risk assessment required can vary depending upon the specific task and hazards associated with it. A safe use plan must address who is qualified to perform the risk assessment, to include training required to have a full understanding of the stages of the risk assessment and the ability to amend the risk assessment as required on the job as circumstances require. IPAF can offer you tools to help complete your risk assessments. An important standalone part of the risk assessment is the development of a rescue plan, too often overlooked. Machine malfunctions, fall arrest from the platform, MEWP's quarters snagged on part of the structure, operator incapacity, machine electrified by overhead lines, a tip over against the structure are examples of various situations that may require very different means of rescue. Deciding what actions to take in the midst of an emergency can take time that can add to the danger of a worker in distress or even create additional hazards if done incorrectly. A rescue plan can include self-rescue by the person involved, assisted rescue by others in the work area, a technical rescue by emergency services. The rescue plan must also include training to ensure workers become qualified to complete this important task in the event of an accident. Another important but commonly overlooked stage of the risk assessment process is the development of safe work procedures. Too often, a company will identify an effective control measure for the hazard, such as staying 10 feet away from an overhead power line, but fail to offer their workers their safe work procedures to implement that control. This example on screen demonstrates the information workers need to effectively answer the question, how am I going to do that? IPAF is developing templates to assist users in creating their safe work procedures that can apply to many known hazards identified through our accident reporting analysis. Another stage in the risk assessment is the selection of correct machines for the work. A task that seems simple. I need a lift that will reach X feet high. But in reality, there is much more that must be considered in your safe use plan that will include guidelines for your personnel to select the appropriate MEWP, rated capacity, number of occupants, working height and reach, allowable ground load pressures. Other items such as MEWP accessories are some of the questions to consider in your MEWP selection. It must consider the provision of the MEWP. Is the equipment available? If the only equipment available is not optimal for the task or other such safe parameters, can you adequately modify your risk assessment to accommodate safe use for the available MEWP? Safe use considerations. Is my operator trained for the MEWP category, and how will they get familiarized? Based on conditions and complexity of the task, are your operators qualified to perform the task? Does the safe use plan cover this equipment and task? And associated equipment. What is the personal protective equipment required? What about specialized tools, barricades, or related safe use equipment? IPAF offers tools to assist in the MEWP selection to include as part of your safe use plan. Are your managers trained and aware of what equipment is available for the marketplace? You must have qualified persons assigned to complete the task in the safe use plan who are trained, qualified managers, supervisors. IPAF training centers are a source for your managers or supervisors that they can take completely remote or online courses to assist in developing qualified persons for your plan. Are your managers aware of innovations that can assist in the safe and productive completion of their task when making their MEWP selections? Your safe use plan should consider adding requirements for annual continual professional development hours specific to MEWPs for your managers. When selecting the correct MEWP for the task, consideration must include the ability for the MEWPs to safely move in the work area. As site conditions can change, proper maintenance of the site to accommodate the MEWP is a necessity. A critical consideration is the assessment of the evaluation of the support structure to adequately support the weight of the MEWP in all of its configurations. This is not knowledge that most MEWP operators are qualified to answer. You must have a plan that defines who is qualified to make these decisions. Know your responsibilities. Are you renting the equipment? Do you own it? Who is responsible for maintenance, inspections, repairs? Are those individuals qualified to perform those tasks? Is it clear to your personnel using the equipment what their responsibilities are, what they should do, and what they should not do? All MEWPs require scheduled maintenance, pre-delivery inspections, frequent inspections, annual inspections, daily pre-start inspections, maintenance and repair training, implementing maintenance and repair safety precautions, replacement parts to be identical or equivalent to the original MEWP parts or components, registering the MEWP with the manufacturer to ensure that you receive safety-related bulletins. Your plan must make it clear who is responsible to perform these tasks, the rental company or you, the user. And if it is the user, the training for your personnel to be qualified to perform all of these tasks. Hopefully, you can see how a MEWP-specific safe use plan is a needed document for all users of this equipment to make sure that you have fully complete, compliant, safe use operations. Too often it's thought that personnel getting them through operator course is all that's necessary to make them qualified. Training itself, by definition, enables one to become qualified. Here are some of the requirements you must include in your plan. Operator qualifications. The user shall ensure that the operator is both physically and mentally capable to operate a MEWP safely. So when we look at the question that comes up too often, mentally capable, what does that mean? An IQ test? And really think about someone who's petrified about being elevated in a MEWP. That is an example of, are they qualified to perform the task? The employer is responsible to assess if personnel are qualified to perform that task. As an example, a newly trained operator may not be qualified to perform complex tasks in a confined working space. The employer must ensure that the MEWP operators provide instructions or otherwise ensure all occupants have the basic knowledge to work safely from the MEWP. How will workers be assessed? Who will complete the assessment? These are issues that a safe use plan must define and communicate. The plan must communicate to all employees involved in MEWP operations that they understand the need and value of MEWP-specific familiarization prior to operation. The safe use plan must address how you will ensure that the operators receive familiarization prior to operation. And that can include examples such as rental companies, hire companies delivering the equipment before personnel are on site, changes in operators assigned to the job during the task, an exchange of a different MEWP during the course of the job. Potential options could include the delivery of familiarization from the hire rental company, or having a qualified MEWP manager, or possibly through a video on familiarization for that model. After personnel have successfully completed MEWP operator training, when would retraining be required? That must be in your MEWP Safe Use Plan. All personnel that directly supervise MEWP operators must become qualified regarding the rules, regulations, and standards that apply to MEWPs, including the provisions for safe use, training, familiarization, and the tasks to be performed. A qualified MEWP manager or supervisor must be assigned to monitor, supervise, and evaluate operators on a regular basis to ensure their proficiency. The evaluation must be accomplished through visual observation at a minimum, and these should be documented and retained by the user. Some industry standards provide examples when retraining may be required that should be considered as part of your safe use plan, such as deterioration of proficiency, following an accident or a near miss while operating or using a MEWP. If conditions in the workplace change in a manner that could affect safe operations, or new MEWP technologies or working methods. How do you prevent unauthorized use of MEWPs must be in your plan as well. Considerations can include parking in a secured compound or in a supervised area inaccessible to unauthorized persons, requiring all MEWP keys to be removed from MEWPs when not in use, keys used only to or issued only to authorized persons and retained by them until the end of the work period, or new technology such as keypads used through telematics. And then you must consider the safety of others. While you can require training and supervision of your personnel, how will you ensure that the safety of others in or near your work area, to include other workers on site or the general public near or passing by the work area, or other moving vehicles that may be exposed to potential hazards during MEWP operations? Your plan must address how you ensure the protections of others. MEWP operator training delivers general knowledge specific to MEWP operations. However, work sites may add requirements that may exceed MEWP standard requirements or have unique site-specific hazards that require specialized safety protocols, as those shown in the examples on the screen. The Safe Use Plan must define how you will ensure site-specific requirements are provided to the affected personnel, such as required in pre-job meetings. And lastly, you must record your actions. Industry standards have specific requirements and recommendations for documentation for many MEWP-related tasks that must be incorporated in your safe use plan. This further reinforces the correct implementation is being done and proof that you have completed those successfully. This picture has been out in the marketplace for many years, and it speaks to the effectiveness of a safe use plan being simply words on paper versus a true commitment to the safe and effective operations of mobile elevated work platforms. As the opening slide questioned, how do you measure safety? The safe use plan is only a guide. Implementation is commitment. Management commitment to develop, implement, and monitor your safe use plan is your best insurance that safe and productive workplaces will be a reality. IPAF is here to support your efforts, and we have templates to assist you in developing a comprehensive safe use plan. In summary, a MEWP Safe Use Plan is a roadmap to get you where you want to go. It is a document to assist employers and their employees to achieve the goal of a safe and productive workplace. Hopefully, much of what is required in the plan is already in place. This is simply formalizing the plan, verification that all the issues are adequately addressed, communicated, and followed. If it seems like a lot of work, it doesn't have to be. IPAF is here to help. Guidance and templates for all of this will be available soon to all of our members. We do reinforce that regardless of whether you have a MEWP manager, superintendent, foreman, lead operator, a user employer must assign the qualified persons to complete many of the tasks included in your safe use plan. IPAF training centers can afford MEWP manager or supervisor training to assist you in meeting your needs. So safety is a full-time job. Don't think of it as a part-time job. Make sure that you have a safe use plan. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to Peter.
Thank you for that fantastic presentation, Mr. Groat. Next is our final sponsor video. This is features and benefits of an electric scissor lift from Boom. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Julie Houston-Smith, the UK and Ireland Regional Manager for Boom. Today, I've been asked to show you some of the safety features and benefits of the Boom battery scissor product range. This is the Boom 1930S, 19 foot 6 metre platform height hydraulic scissor platform, which is powered by 4 6-volt batteries situated in a lockable tray in the machine base. Locks are on both the cabinets at each side of the machine and are particularly useful to keep your battery pack safe and secure. In here, we have a set of maintenance-free sealed batteries, charged via an onboard battery-specific charger. Of course, it's possible to use different types of batteries in the Boom product range. To do so, simply reprogram the charger to suit the type of batteries fitted. Another clever feature of the Boom battery scissor product range is the transport protection bumper strip. This not only protects the paint finish, but also the decals from being scraped, damaged and becoming illegible. And speaking of decals, let me show you this one, the QR code. Scan the QR code safety decal with your smartphone and gain access to the operator's manual, parts manual, service manual and the CE Certificate of Conformity. Also, a useful change of ownership form which may be completed should your Boom be moving to a new owner. Situated at the back of the machine, beside the emergency lowering handle, is the brake release system. This is particularly useful if the machine has been left completely discharged and needs moved out of the work area. The main platform and extension deck is anti-slip. Let me show you something clever about the control box. It doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed, the Boom control box is designed to be fitted to either side of the deck. The cover on the control box prevents it from water ingress, dirt and paint overspray, and it's easily removable. With a robust yet smooth slide-out extension deck and guardrails designed to fold down quickly and easily on all models, the Boom battery scissor range has a host of well thought out safety features and benefits. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Julie and Boom, for that educational video. Right, our final speaker of today is Paul Roddis, IPAF's Training Manager. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to unmute, which became slightly challenging. Okay, so What I'm going to be talking to you about is ultimately a fairly straightforward 360-degree approach to MEWP safety training. And I'm going to talk to you about all of the training that you need to have in place when you're planning a safe and effective operation. So really, it's just a sequential way of looking at the whole picture right from the planning stage. Now, Tony gave a great overview of what good planning for MEWP use looks like, but clearly there's a vast amount to consider, understand and implement. So that's where IPAF's MEWPs for Managers training comes in. The course is designed to provide all you need to know to be able to ask the right questions and put the right solutions in place. It covers the requirements for all of the international, American, Canadian and British standards. All of those standards for safe MEWP use are different, but it's not difficult to fulfill the requirements of all of them because they are all so similar. Of course, the reason they're so similar is because the right way of doing things is pretty much the same everywhere in the world. Equally, people's brains won't learn in the same way everywhere in the world, so we applied learning science to ensure we created training that would be engaging, effective, and get the best retention levels. The MEWPs for Managers training course is available as e-learning, remote digital training, and traditional classroom training. And this, of course, means that it'll fit around your specific business requirements. Exercises within MEWPs for Managers are challenging, and they're undertaken in a practical way that gives context to the information and directly empowers people to actually go out and plan effectively. So here's just part of one of the exercises. The method we've employed allows the candidates to complete the freedom to choose, what to look at, what to select, so they can zoom in and out, and what they want to do in what order. Once selected, there's a challenge of some sort that requires thought, gives some useful information, and needs some sort of a decision. And as you can see here in this example, which is actually about working near a gantry crane that's powered through unshielded solid electrical conductors called buzz bars, the options all require some thought, and the right answer is actually the one that absolutely guarantees the safety of the MEWP operator. We've ensured that decisions are real by using genuine design specifications within our fleet of options for the various MEWP selection exercises, and incorporated an interesting range of different MEWPs as options. So each of these MEWPs has different attributes and suitabilities for different situations. So when the candidate has to choose, they'll make their decision using real and genuinely useful information. For some of the difficult requirements, as mentioned by Tony, we've broken them down into a simple framework that can be applied to almost every situation. For example, planning for rescue. The simple methods shown here work for almost every situation. And if you use this sort of template every time, of course, putting in your own details and specifics for that particular operation, then you've got a working rescue plan template for every MEWP activity. To further help with the planning elements, we've written a completely new training course purely around selecting the right MEWP for the task, environment and conditions. And this new course will be released on the 31st of March this year. We'll tell you a bit more about that in our next webinar on the 24th of March, and you can actually register for that webinar right now if you wish. So on to the next section, supervision. Now, supervision is a very broad term. Some supervisors will be supervising an entire site, where others may be directly looking after a small team. So the training will depend on their role or possibly their future role. However, competent supervision is not an option, it is a requirement. In the United States and Canada, we've created a specific MEWP supervisor training course to correspond with a requirement from their specific standards. But for the rest of us, it's all about the supervisor's exact role. Clearly, a minimum for a supervisor would be operator training. Otherwise, they'd have to take the operator's word for it that they're following their training. And sometimes, sadly, they're not. Some organisations want their supervisors qualified to conduct familiarisations, so they send them on a demonstrators course. Some supervisors will be expected to select the right MEWP for the job, so the new site assessment course will be very useful for that. Where others need their supervisors to know a lot more and even take control of creating the safe use plan itself. So that require MEWPs for managers. So it's just whatever's right for you, for your business and for your teams. Certainly something that would be useful for a supervisor is harness training. And you may ask why? Well, the supervisor has to determine whether the operator is using their harness in a way that will actually protect them. Supervisors are also often involved in ordering replacement harnesses, so they need to know what they're looking for. And a harness requires an independent inspection periodically, so the supervisor is in a good position to do that after passing the training course. And so next and most obvious element is, of course, competent operation. Now, organizations are usually pretty good at knowing that operators need training, but there are still some challenges. How can you know that the training you're paying for is actually any good? And how could you prove it in court if you needed to? I mean, I've seen operator e-learning training for sale as purely theory with no practical training or evaluation. And the main selling point is that it can be completed in under an hour. So could that be considered as adequate? Well, no, is the answer. Certainly not. But what might shock you is that literally anyone, regardless of knowledge, experience, or expertise, can create any MEWP training they like, and then they can sell it to you. The onus of responsibility for providing adequate training is yours. You are supposed to somehow know whether it's good enough or not. And it's you that would be in court trying to prove that the training that you provided to your teams was adequate, not the training provider. You chose to buy it for your people. IPAF operator training meets and is audited to the international standard ISO 18878. So this is your guarantee of quality, your evidence that the training is adequate, and your peace of mind that your team will be both safe and effective when using MEWPs. So seriously, don't accept and pay for substandard training. You're being duped and you're being put at risk. The phenomenal success of IPAF operator training in the PAL card is due to the quality and the reliability of this training, and also the direct rewards that it brings back into your business through a lack of accidents, more effective and efficient working, and of course, a lack of fines for not providing adequate training. There are almost 550 training centres around the world, many with satellites providing even greater coverage. These can be easily located using the search facility or interactive map on the IPAF website. Every year, over 166,000 people get it right. And as a card lasts 5 years, right now there are over 800,000 live PAL cards proving that these operators have the skills that you need them to have. Incredibly, to date, over 2 million people have successfully passed the IPAF operator training course. Of course, operators do need to be trained on the correct category of MEWP. And while these categories can seem confusing, there is a really simple and helpful way of generally determining which category of MEWP you need your operator to have been trained on. So we can just ask 2 simple questions. Can it drive when elevated? If the answer is no, it's a group 1. If it's yes, then it's a group 3. Next question is, does it reach out? If the answer is no, it's a type A. If it's yes, it's a type B. So then we simply combine the group and type to create the category. For example, in the poster bottom right, can drive at height, which is group 3, and it can reach out, which is a type B, so it's a 3B. So it's relatively simple. Now you might have spotted that group 2 is missing. Now, group 2 differs because it's controlled from a point of control at the chassis and not the platform. And IPAF do train on these, but we term the training for these as special, and it's specific to the actual machine itself. But sometimes standard IPAF operator training on the correct category may not be enough. During your planning stage, you'll be assessing risks, and some risks, some tasks will have to be done in higher risk or more challenging environments, and that's where PAL Plus comes in. So what are these higher risk or more challenging environments? Well, of course, they'll vary. You know, it could be a factory with complex conveyors and overhead trunking. It could be net rigging during steel building construction. I mean, it could be all sorts of things. But what is clear from these statistics is that maintenance, installation, and electrical work hold the highest risk of crushing and entrapment, and therefore would benefit from the greater skill levels demonstrated in PAL Plus. PAL Plus is an advanced qualification specifically designed for these higher risk and more challenging environments. In one of the assessments, candidates have to make their way through a simulated window and out through another set at 90 degrees to the first. And believe me, it's very difficult. It can be undertaken in virtual reality using an IPAF approved simulator or on a real machine at a training center. It requires intelligent observation and very high levels of control and skill to actually achieve this qualification. So you can directly reduce risk in these higher risk, more challenging environments by training the operator to this advanced level. So now it's time to complete the circle. And this is taking a wider view really and stepping back from the specific MEWP related task. Operators are trained on pre-use inspections in their operator training. They're trained on checking batteries, the correct PPE to wear, etc. But we also train the technicians that inspect the MEWPs before delivery. We train and assess the people that will conduct the periodic statutory inspections and thorough examinations that ensure ongoing MEWP integrity. When a MEWP's delivered to you, the driver should have been trained on the safe loading and unloading. And once offloaded, your people need to be familiarized. And the person familiarizing them could have been trained on the IPAF demonstrator course. So as you can see, training's key through all safe operations. And what stands out here most for me is that supervisors have the biggest range of potentially applicable training. And yet supervisors are the most frequently overlooked for training at all. You can see easily from this completed view exactly who should receive which training and what the options are. So I hope that you can use this as part of your creation of a safe use plan. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll be very happy to answer your questions, which Peter will be taking now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Great presentation, as usual. My team have been fantastic at answering questions throughout this and have answered 19 they've typed the answers to during this session, but there are one or two questions. A common one that's coming through is, can I have a copy of the presentations? What we are doing is we are publishing this webinar on the website, so you can go back and view at any time. If there are any specific slides that you require for your own work to further our safety cause, if you like, we will gladly share those with you, but we won't be distributing them out to the full packs to everybody. So please get in touch with us at info@ipaf.org, and we will send you any selected slides you wish to see. But the whole thing will be on the website for you all to view. There's a couple of questions. Probably one, well, on daily inspections, there is a lack of awareness around checking batteries and correct PPE. IPAF need to do more. Can I give that one to you, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Every operator training course covers the checking of batteries, the correct PPE to use when doing so, and all of the risks associated. So all of those 800,000 live PAL cards, every one of those people has been trained in that. I think part of the problem is that, as I mentioned before, I don't think supervisors are being trained well enough or often enough to be able to make sure that this actually happens. And unless we've got that whole picture where everyone knows, then no one's enforcing it and no one's creating those rules around it. We've also got information on our website about these checks, etc. So the information is there. We just have to put the pieces together.
Thank you, Paul. Got one from Tommy Brown. Just wondered what IPAF's opinion on spotters were being used and the pros and cons. I think we answered a similar question to this. Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to take that one again.
Go ahead, Paul.
Spotters, there are some significant advantages to having spotters in certain situations. And there are some, potential disadvantages, because if a spotter doesn't position themselves correctly, they can, misinform, etc. So it's all, once again, down to risk assessment. What can't someone see that a spotter could assist with? What's the value of that? And has the spotter been trained as, a banksman? Are they operator trained on MEWPs? So do they know what they're looking for? But certainly, if the risk assessment says that this would be beneficial, absolutely no problem with that.
Thank you, Paul. I've got one for Tony. Tony you mentioned during your presentation about templates to help people produce the safe use plan. When will the templates be available?
We are developing multiple items. We have many of them in hand already. It is our plan to get a formalized approach to this out within the next several months at the latest.
Thanks, Tony. I've got a specific question here around a specific model of machine from Bradley Caddick. How is a Nifty Lift DR15 categorised? As it changes from a 3B to a 1B, how can you justify further training to customers and operators when in their eyes it's easier to operate without the drive systems? All they need to do is drop. Is that one for you, Paul? You discuss the different categories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately with that, it's not completely unique, but it's almost unique in it's the way that it actually operates. And essentially, if someone is trained on that particular machine as a 3B, then they've got all of the training they need. When you then remove the drive and it is a static, ultimately you've already been trained on all of that, and that would be absolutely fine.
The only other thing I would perhaps add for the deck rider aspect of it is I've seen some seen images before on photos where deck riders have been in position, but you've also then got to consider all the other aspects of how you carry out your pre-use checks, your function checks. I've seen horrible pictures of people sort of shimmying across steelwork to try and check out the ground controls work and turning the key over. So certainly, if we go back to Tony's aspect, there's got to be a very, very good plan in place for using deck riders too.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Paul. Last one then. I think any training available in relation to troubleshooting training for operators to cover the most common problems with MEWPs?
Troubleshooting to cover the most common problems, it depends. I mean, ultimately, the most common things that would go wrong for an operator that could potentially result in, injuries, etc. Yes, absolutely. Within the operator training, within MEWPs for managers, we cover all those, the hazards, the risks, the control measures, the likelihoods, etc. If you're talking about troubleshooting, i.e. repairing a MEWP, obviously that's a very different thing. So that would be down to, engineers. But certainly, yeah, hazards, risks, all covered.
I would probably look at that in a different way and think, great answer there, Paul, but I think it's about, recognising and understanding when operators are not using the machines correctly. So when they are overloading the kit, when they're not using the equipment properly. So for me personally, I think that's a great opportunity for people to go and get trained in a managers and a supervisors course. That will give you the ability then to identify some of the the things that operators do or shouldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I may have misinterpreted that or not. I don't know.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much to my team once again. Great presentations. Thank you to you guys for registering, watching, and getting involved and asking questions. I hope you found it. I hope you found it useful. Just one last thing for me before we go. Paul mentioned our next webinar. The registration is open on that one now, but we also have our annual summit and awards, which is being held virtually this year on the 18th of March. You can register for that at www.ipaf.org/events. Registration's open now. It's free to attend the summit, and this year free to attend the virtual awards as well. So we'd like to see as many people from across the world as we can for our annual celebration of the powered access industry. Thank you once again, and finally to our sponsors, Bronto Skylift, Cena Boom, Hinoa and Sunwood, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.